There are very few athletes whose drive, talent, and heart even get them to the Olympic Games. Fewer still are those who burst onto the Olympic scene with unforgettable performances. And then there are those rare athletes who go on to achieve even greater success in the arena of life after their days of athletic glory have ended. At the tender age of 20, John Naber had an Olympic experience that most athletes could only dream about. He was America's most decorated athlete at the 1976 Summer Olympic Games in Montreal. He set 4 world records and became the first swimmer in history to win 2 individual Olympic medals on the same day of competition. At the Montreal Games, John Naber amassed a total of 5 Olympic medals, 4 gold and 1 silver. In a sport where records don't usually last very long, John Naber's lasted an amazing 7 years beyond his retirement.
Hello, I'm John Naber. Coming into this meeting.
After his retirement from swimming, John Naber entered the broadcasting field, serving as analyst, play-by-play announcer, or sideline reporter for over 35 different sports for CBS, NBC, ABC, ESPN, Fox, and Turner Broadcasting, covering 8 Olympic Games. His book, Awaken the Olympian Within, contains inspirational stories from many of the country's most popular Olympic motivators. John Naber has translated a lifelong devotion to hard work and excellence in athletics into success in the business world, and to personal fulfillment as a volunteer for many national and local charities. John Naber believes that Olympic athletes are not extraordinary people. They are ordinary people who have accomplished some extraordinary things. Due to his ability to do extraordinary things, John was elected in a nationwide USA Today poll as the male captain of the 100 Golden Olympians, an all-star collection of America's greatest Olympic champions. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your meeting host, John Naber.
Begin by repeating what the video said. Olympic champions are not extraordinary people. We are ordinary people who found a way to accomplish extraordinary things, but on a day-to-day basis, we're just regular folks. In fact, when I watch the NFL, I'm intimidated. When I watch the NBA, I'm impressed, but these are people I don't relate to. But when I watch the Olympics, it's usually little boys and girls with the help of mom and dad who found a way to become the best in the world at one particular thing. It's the ordinariness of Olympians that I find most inspiring. The ordinariness of the Olympians was brought crystal clear to me at the Olympic Village in Montreal, Canada in 1976. That year, 6,700 athletes descended upon a city in Canada and lived together in a village that shared a cafeteria. The only way you can feed 6,700 hungry Olympic athletes is the buffet line. Our credential got us a bright plastic orange tray, and we got to walk sideways in front of the steam trays that filled with food to accommodate all the visiting nationalities. Sweet and sour pork, curry fried chicken, Wiener Schnitzel and sauerbraten, tacos and burritos, spaghetti and lasagna, hamburgers and cokes. I'm moving through the line when I bump into this 15-year-old gymnast from Romania. She became a household name because that year she got the first perfect 10 in Olympic competition. Anybody remember who I'm talking about? Nadia Comaneci. Little sweetheart. She had a bright, empty orange tray. She said, "Yeah, have a stick of celery, please." They handed it to her. She goes, "Thank you." Not quite like that, but in any case, I took my tray, I went down and sat down. Across the table from me was one of the many athletes from one of the other Olympic countries. In the 1970s, countries weren't building swimming pools and tennis courts. They were busy building sewage treatment plants and freeway overpasses. Many of the athletes didn't have a limo take them to the airport. They rode a bicycle. They didn't wear shoes to school. And they were teleported from their hometown across the ocean and dropped into the middle of the conveniences of the modern world. It was like a time warp. These guys had never enjoyed air conditioning, never ridden in an elevator. They're looking at neon lights and microwave ovens and elevators and escalators. It was like a whole new world for many of these athletes. Across from me was an athlete from a country whose language I don't think I spoke. He had his food on his tray. On the corner was a saucer with a teacup filled with boiling water. And on the edge of the saucer was the official tea bag of the Olympics. I noticed because it had the 5 rings on the paper square. He picked up the tea bag, he held it to his nose, and he smelled the familiar scent of the Darjeeling tea leaves. And then he smiled and he tore open the bag and poured the loose tea into the water. He'd never seen a flow-through tea bag, but he is an Olympian. And I'm an Olympian, and as such there's a bond, a kinship, a fraternity. So I tried to convey to him what to do. I held my tea bag, my paper, my ceramic mug, and the paper tag of the tea bag, and I pointed at the bag and I said, "Paper, okay. Paper, okay." And I dipped the bag in the water a couple of times, draped the string over the edge. The water starts changing color, and I slid the cup across the table, and pointing again, I said, "Paper, okay." And he looked at me, and then he looked at the cup. And I saw the awareness and the smile sweep across his face. "Pepper, okay," he said. Yes, I'd done it. I'd struck a blow for international harmony. I was feeling so proud of myself. I watched as he reaches over, he gets an envelope of sugar and pops that baby right in the cup. Not extraordinary people. Ordinary people, capable of ordinary mistakes, but interestingly, the very next day, that same guy comes walking into the cafeteria wearing an Olympic bronze medal around his neck, thereby having proven himself one of the top 3 performers on the planet at his chosen field of expertise. So logically, if we can view ourselves as at least ordinary, then logically we too can accomplish extraordinary things and behave in extraordinary ways and do things that make a difference in our world. That's what makes the Olympics so inspiring. Now, when I speak to corporate America, I talk about achievement and setting goals and reaching the dreams and all those good things. It's not my talk today. Today I'm talking about character and ethics. Now, who does Naber think he is to talk to me about ethics? Well, I'm not here to tell you that I'm perfect. In fact, far from it. I'm a sinner and I know it. But I am here to tell you that the process Olympic champions use to enjoy great success is applicable in life. And the things that we can learn through sport about character and ethics are lessons we can apply on our day-to-day basis. My challenge is to spend the next 45 minutes or so sharing with you some observations that I have in the world of sport and how they pertain to character and ethics. And it's my desire that you will find something worth remembering after the talk. Let me give you a little bit of background, a little history. This talk is called Pursuing Victory with Honor. I do not believe that character and ethics means being happy to lose. I do not mean that sportsmanship means it's okay not to do your best. I don't think that at all. I believe that we need to try to be as successful as we possibly can, to give glory and honor to our parents and our teachers and our God in some way to make a positive difference in our world. But if we receive glory and honor but did not earn it fairly, it's a huge, huge blunder. It's a missed opportunity and it's not satisfying. Pursuing victory with honor is character-driven accomplishment. I hope and wish that for us all. Sports are a metaphor for life. There's a lot of teaching moments that occur in the world of sport, and why is that? Well, I think it's because everybody on the field of play agrees to the rules. We all understand what the rules are, but more than that, there's always cameras taking pictures so that we can replay it back again to see what happened. Wherever there's cameras, people tend to behave or try to behave in a character-driven manner, and sports is all about watching things happen in front of the cameras. Anybody remember this quote from Vince Lombardi? Winning isn't everything, but
It's the only thing.
it's the only thing. That's what we remember him saying. Vince Lombardi is deemed as one of the greatest coaches in the NFL, but that's not what he said. What Vince Lombardi actually said is, winning isn't everything, but the will to win is. I'm sorry, I missed that. Winning isn't everything, but the will to win is. There's a difference. Winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. That's absolutely contrary to what Vince Lombardi actually said. The will to win, the desire to be at our best, the desire to enjoy victory, there's nothing unsportsmanlike about it. It's absolutely appropriate. Anybody here recognize this guy? His name is Baron Pierre de Coubertin. Baron Pierre de Coubertin is the founder of the modern Olympic Games. He's the guy who began the Olympics again in 1896 in Athens, Greece. Not an athlete. He was an educator. He's a teacher by profession. And he perceived the Olympic Games as a means by which to educate society at large on the better way to live, the better choices of life. He wrote in the founding of the Games, the Olympic ideal is a love of sport for itself, for its highly educative value, and for the pursuit of human perfection. It wasn't about winning medals. The Olympic ideal also goes on to say, Olympism seeks to create a way of life based on the joy found in effort, the educational value of good example, and respect for universal, fundamental, ethical principles. That's the reason of the Olympics. I tell audiences, I told one earlier today, I spent 8 years of my life to become the fastest backstroker in the world, and I haven't used that skill once since. The ability to swim quickly while on your back has limited value in society at large. So why do we make such a big deal about sports? Because sports has the ability to make better adults out of young men and women, and it's a rallying cry for what's good and right, a combination of following the rules and enjoying success. The Olympic motto, anybody here speak Latin? Anybody here know Latin? The Olympic motto, Citius Altius Fortius. Translated from the Latin, it means swifter, higher, stronger. Note, it doesn't say swiftest, highest, strongest. The purpose of the Olympic Games is not to honor the excellent, it's to encourage the devoted. That everybody can go out there and be a little bit better and a little bit faster and a little bit stronger. As a result, anybody who marches in the opening ceremonies could feel like they could come home feeling like a winner because they were swifter or higher or stronger than they've ever been before. Swifter, higher, stronger, the motto. Amo amas amat. Interestingly, when I competed in the 1970s, the Olympic movement was purely amateur. What it meant was you were not allowed to be paid to be an athlete. In the 1940s and 50s, you weren't allowed to dig ditches for a living and throw the shot put as an Olympian because you were essentially being paid to exercise. That was how tightly the rules were held. And so if I were to ask you, is an amateur athlete as good as a professional athlete? You'd say, well, I don't know. And let me ask you this, how many of you would be willing to go see an amateur dentist? In our mind, amateur, no money, means not as good as professional who gets all the bucks. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not the meaning of the word. The Latin derivative of amateur is amo, amas, amat. Amat, he loves. An amateur coin collector just loves collecting coins. An amateur backstroker loves swimming the backstroke. And to be an amateur athlete in that era was an honor and a privilege and a delight. Being amateur is not a bad thing. Now, since then, in 1982, the Olympic Committee removed the word amateur from the Olympic Charter, allowing any federation, any sport governing body to determine their own rules requiring eligibility. But at the time, we were all amateur. When you think about the headlines, the sports headlines in that era, if you remember the sports, well, you're all too young perhaps, but when a long time ago, the headlines in the newspapers were all about accomplishment. Abdul-Jabbar scored 10,000th point. Those are headlines you probably remember because they talked about people's accomplishments. Since then, if you read the newspapers, the headlines are different. They talk about different things, inflate gate or whatever. deflate gate, excuse me. Why is that? Why are we talking about bad character in the sports pages? These are things we all ought to be honoring. 8th graders are being recruited to college. In fact, they're being told they can't go on vacation with their family because they have to stay and do the summer spring training camp. Little leaguers are lying about their ages so their team can win a championship. And there was a hockey coach who was killed by an angry parent because his kid didn't get enough ice time. What on earth is going on? The Olympic movement is not immune. These are just a few that I've seen since 2006. Of course, Lance Armstrong was an Olympic medal winner in cycling. Oscar Pistorius, remember him, the Blade Runner? Yeah, he's a great athlete. He's not a good guy. Badminton scandal, remember that? China and Singapore were playing for the gold medal in badminton. 4 teams. The winner of each semifinal would play for the medal. But prior to that is the quarterfinal, and the lower ranking team would play the higher ranking opponent. And so these teams ended up seeing who could lose the match. They were hitting the badminton into the net intentionally. The audience who paid $200 a ticket were booing, rightfully so. Ryan Lochte, oh my gosh. He is one of the nicest guys in the sport of swimming. He literally, at the U.S. National Championships, will sign an autograph to a kid and give him the gold medal he just won at the Nationals. Ryan's a good guy, but he does dumb things. And it's a horrible shame because that's what he'll be remembered for. Now, of course, the U.S. Olympic Committee is all in the throes of what's going on with the gymnastics kids and the safe sport movement, and so many changes need to be made. And all of this is on the sports pages when we ought to be celebrating all this wonderful stuff. So here's a thought for the moment. My dad is a management consultant. The front page of every one of his reports has this sentence. Your system is ideally engineered to give you the results you're getting now. Does that make sense? Your system, if you want what you're getting now, make no changes whatsoever. If you're happy with the results, you've got the perfect system. But logically, if you're not happy with the results, maybe something has got to change. Why do people make bad choices when it comes to questions of character? People don't wake up in the morning and decide, I want to be bad. But yet, they end up making choices that tell us that's not a good person. So what is going on when that happens? Well, I know in the world of sport what the rationalization is. What people now call, oh, you don't understand, I'm under so much pressure to win, that if I don't win, I'm not going to get to go to college, or I'm going to lose my job, or whatever. We used to call that temptation. You know, you hang a carrot in front of somebody and that was temptation. Now, not earning the carrot is pressure. I have to win. And I've discovered that since the days of amateur athletics, when the word amateur was taken out, very quickly, prize money, sponsorships, endorsements, training grants, all of a sudden the money started to flow in. And of course, the higher the reward, the greater the temptation. And so I'm not so sure that opening the Olympics to professionals was necessarily a good idea. I have some real genuine questions about it. If you feel that you need to justify a decision because you were pressured by somebody else, whether that be peer pressure, whether that be parental pressure, whether that be headquarter office pressure, whether that be what pressure coming out of the chancellor's office. If you feel that you have to make bad choices because I'm being pressured to do so, you're right here among others, just like us. And we're turning up the heat. The pressure is growing on a daily basis. In Division I, the win-loss record, you maybe have 1 or 2 years to prove yourself. The rewards continue to grow. The competition is fiercer for these higher rewards. There's less time to establish a program. They want results now. And as you may remember that Nike commercial, you don't win the silver, you lose the gold. I've asked this question twice today in various audiences. By show of hands, Can anybody in this room name an American Olympian whose best result was a silver medal? Whose best result was a silver medal? I got one hand. Anybody else? Look at us. We love sports, but a silver medal isn't worth remembering. In this country, if we don't win, we're losers. The movie Unbroken, we saw it last year about Louis Zamperini, the Olympic runner who competed in 1936 and then was a bombardier in World War II. And his plane crashed in the ocean and he floated for 47 days on a life raft until he was discovered by the Japanese and imprisoned for 2.5 years. He told me, I've been a friend of his for 30 years, he told me when I came back from the 1936 Olympics, people asked me, how did you do? And he said, I won 6th place. What place did you win? I won 6th place. When was the last time you heard a kid today say, I won 6th place? That's the change that's happening now. We're all about winning, and we're no longer as concerned as we should be about the performance itself. So a thought for the moment. If you're unwilling to lose, what's the natural consequence? You'll soon be willing to do anything in order to win. If you're unwilling to lose, sooner or later you're going to be willing to do anything in order to win. The opposite of sportsmanship is gamesmanship. Gamesmanship is bending, twisting the rules, doing whatever you can to be successful. Michael Josephson is an ethicist in California. He says, if the linemen on the opposite side of the football are giving each other grief about their mother wearing army boots, they're trying to get in your head, trying to make you a worse football player. But think about it. You say your mother wears army boots often enough, it loses its ability to be effective. So what's the natural consequence? You have to ratchet up the vulgar language. If you're unwilling to lose, pretty soon you're going to do stuff that you shouldn't do. I like to think instead of the opposite. The definition of sportsmanship, if gamesmanship is trying to win at all costs, in my opinion, the definition of sportsmanship is trying to win on your opponent's best day. It's okay to try to win, but it's nice to win fairly against somebody who's really good at what they do. I imagine 2 children in school trying to see who's the tallest, and they stand back to back and somebody puts a cereal box on their head and sees who's the tallest. And if I stand on my tippy toes, am I allowing the discovery to be legitimate? Of course not. Of course not. So a red light warning. Let's take a look at this. Let's think about it. When getting the gold medal matters more than earning the gold medal, we've stepped across the line. If I walk out of here and I left my gold medal on the back table and you find it, does that mean you're a good swimmer? Of course not. Having the gold medal doesn't matter. Earning the gold medal is what really matters most. So a working definition, by the way, I should point this out, I love Latin. I studied it in Europe a little bit. Competition. Com, meaning together. Petition, meaning to seek. A competition is where people come together to seek to discover something. I cannot be the fastest backstroker in the world unless all the other good backstrokers are there. If you go to compete against an event and there's a boycott announced and your main competition doesn't show up, the victory is a little bit hollow. It rings hollow. And therefore, your opponents, the enemy on the other side of the ball, are really not bad guys at all. They're your buddies. They're trying to help you with the discovery of the better outcome. Respect for opponents, respect for officials, respect for volunteers, all of this is an important part of athletics. Let me talk about some examples of sportsmanship. Eugenio Monti was an Italian who was a bobsled driver. His main competition was the British bobsled team led by Mr. Nash. And after Eugenio Monti went down the hill and had a successful time on the clock, he heard that Nash's bobsled had lost a bolt in the front runner and was unable to come down the hill. And he unscrewed a bolt from his own sled, gave it to a runner who ran up the hill. They gave it to Bob Nash, and Nash screwed it into his sled, and he and his team came down the bobsled run. And they did so faster than Eugenio Monti had. They got the gold, Eugenio got the silver, and the reporter said, "Monti, why did you help the Brits win the gold?" And he said, "I didn't help them win the gold, I just gave them a nut." He said, "They earned the gold, and they deserve the gold." The Medal of Eternal Friendship. Two Japanese track and field athletes were competing, were trained together, were buddies in their training, and in the in the high jump competition at the 1964 Games in Tokyo, hometown crowd watching. Every time you clear the bar is elevated, and those who didn't clear don't compete. Well, it came down to the final three athletes, and the two Japanese were part of that threesome. And they all cleared the bar, but the two of them failed at the next height. So the two Japanese were in the silver and bronze medal position, and they thought that they tied. They both cleared the same height. They went home arm in arm. The next morning it was announced that on the basis of fewer misses, one of the two gets the silver, the other gets the bronze. And these two guys, dear friends, promptly took their medals down to a jeweler, had them cut in half, and welded the whole two halves together, so they each have a silver-bronze medal. The Eternal Medal of Friendship is one of the famous stories in Olympic history. Jesse Owens, one of the greatest athletes in track and field, competed in the Berlin Olympics in front of Adolf Hitler himself. And one of the Nazi German athletes in the long jump was Lutz Long. And Lutz was picked by the Germans to be Jesse's greatest competitor. In the long jump, everybody takes 3 attempts, and the fastest or the longest 8 or 12 advance to the finals. In the first 2 jumps, Jesse Owens fouled out. His foot went beyond the launch pad, and his distance did not count. And if he fouled a 3rd time, he was going to be eliminated from competition, leaving the field virtually untouched for Lutz Long to coast to a victory. But Lutz Long came over to Jesse Owens and he said, "Jesse, I've been watching how far you're going. You're jumping almost out of the pit. Why don't you just jump early? Don't try to jump close to the line. In fact, I'll stand 2 feet ahead and I'll hold a towel right here so you can see it. And if you jump early, you'll clearly advance to the finals, and then we'll have a great matchup tomorrow." If your opponent came to you and said, "Trust me, I'll hold the towel and tell you where to jump." But in those days, Jesse Owens trusted Lutz Long. He did exactly as he was told. He easily qualified to the finals, where he went on to win the gold medal, and Lutz got the silver. And after the Olympics, Hitler wasn't happy, and he sent Lutz Long to the Russian front, where he died in combat. 20 years later, Lutz Long's daughter was walked down the aisle of her wedding on the arm of Jesse Owens. Because of the friendship and the trust and the Sportsmanship Act, Jesse Owens himself said, "I would trade all of my Olympic medals for the kind of friendship I had with Lutz Long." Stefania Belmondo is an Italian long-distance cross-country skier. And in cross-country skiing, the race takes about 45 minutes. It's a long, grueling event. Stefania Belmondo was an early champion. She had won 4 years prior. And when she enters the competition, very early on, her pole, pressing hard on it, her pole bent and broke. Now imagine trying to cross-country ski with only one pole. She was in the lead, and she started falling back, and people were passing her left and right. A Canadian coach pulled a spare pole out of his pack, and he handed it to Stefania Belmondo, who, though she was a little bit behind, started her effort to come back, and she was able to pass her competition and win the gold. The silver medal went to the Canadian. These are the kind of stories that I love in the Olympics. How about those of you who watched at the recent Winter Olympics from Korea? Remember the guy with the bare shirt, the bare chest from Tonga? Taufatofua. Pita Taufatofua. He was the flag bearer from Tonga, and he literally marched into this kind of weather, sub-zero, freezing weather in the Winter Olympics with a bare chest. Everybody loved him. He's such a hottie. He's got an 8-pack, you know, everybody thought he was so cool. He was competing in cross-country skiing, but the story I love that they don't tell about it is though he finished, I think, 65th out of 70. When he crossed the finish line, fully dressed in competition gear, I might add, when he crossed the finish line, he stood there and he waited until all the other competitors finished the race as well. Because together they were working to see who's the best, and he wanted to be there to cheer everybody else on. Rationalization or a rational choice. If we decide to justify our behavior before we execute it, that's probably a justifying move, a rational move. But if we use hindsight to justify our behavior, then that becomes a rationalization. And that's not the same thing. So if you try to justify your choice by what you decided to do after the fact, you're on thin ice. This is what I call, this is the most important part. If you're taking notes of anything, please make a note of this. This is what I refer to as the Raddison character grid. I wrote it down because I learned about it when I went to a meeting at a Raddison hotel in Los Angeles. Professor Malin Wakin identified the different pitfalls of character. But in the seminar, we learned how to address them, how people will justify bad choices, and what you want to say to somebody who tries to justify a bad choice, and then what you might want to do to prevent bad choices in the future. So let's go through these one at a time. This is the meat and potatoes. Professor Malin Wakin referred to myopia, meaning if nobody's there to watch, it doesn't matter what I do. We talked to the classroom today. If you come to a red light or even a stop sign at 2 in the morning and there's nobody around, is it okay to blow through? Well, there's nobody watching. Why not? That's the justification. Nobody will know that I made a bad choice. We happen to know that they find out. But let's assume that that was the decision. Well, the obvious answer is, you'll know. You're not nobody. If you have a religious faith, you'll say God knows. He's not a nobody. It's easy to counter, no one will know, because yes, somebody will know. But what can we do to inoculate ourselves from the myopia in the future? Well, one is to pay attention to what you do, because God is. Your parents will know someday. But also to surround yourself with like-minded friends who will help you champion good choices. I like those ideas. The second one is called moral egoism. The rationalization is, it's a dog-eat-dog world out there. It's in my best interests. I got to do it. You know, I mean, I don't want to be a cheat, but I have to get into graduate school, so I'm going to go ahead and buy the term paper. It's in my best interests. Well, if you want to say that, well then say, well, what about the other person? Who lost the spot because you were willing to cheat? In 1996 at the Olympic trials and the Olympic swim team trials for the games in Atlanta. They were held in Indianapolis, I believe, or maybe even Texas. That's where it was, in Austin, Texas. An American and world record holder in the 400 IM, a girl named Christine Quantz, in the preliminary heats, does a slightly accidental, illegal turn. It didn't help her, it didn't benefit her at all. But an official saw the bad turn and disqualified her in the preliminary heats. The governing body of the sport was almost incensed because she won by 12 seconds. It was a minute infraction. It didn't really matter. So can't we just look the other way? And the official said, but you asked me to rule. And Christine Quantz took the penalty without complaint. And here's another reason why it was a wise choice. She felt better because she admitted on video, yes, you're right, my shoulders were beyond vertical. But she also admitted that when she was disqualified, the 9th place preliminary swimmer became the 8th place preliminary swimmer and earned the right to compete in the finals. And in the finals, the 8th place swimmer actually earned a spot on the Olympic team. Wasn't likely, but that's how it turned out. So Christine Quantz said, by enforcing my right to be right, I'm going to punish an innocent in my place. And so she looked at the other person. She said, if I were to trade places, if she were to have broken the rules, how would I feel? And it helped her be more comfortable with her choice. And if we think about the stakeholders, in virtually every moral decision we face, there are stakeholders outside of ourselves. For example, if the Lobers were caught cheating in football, who are the stakeholders? Well, the opposing team are the stakeholders. They could have benefited. The coach's reputation suffers. He's a stakeholder. The university's reputation suffers. You're all stakeholders. In fact, where does that ripple end? It almost doesn't. If you think about in the Olympic world, following the rules are important to the integrity of the Olympic Games. Therefore, any gold medalist is a stakeholder when any one of us cheats. Ethical relativity. People use this all the time in the Olympic sports. I took performance-enhancing drugs, but I didn't take as many as my opponent. I may be bad, but you're worse. I'm speeding, but there are other guys going by me a lot faster. Ethical relativity is often used as a justification for unethical behavior. What do you say? What do you say to somebody who's going just a few miles over the speed limit? What if everybody did it? I'm only, shoplifting the candy bar. It's not a big deal. What if everybody took a candy bar? If you don't like the rules, change them. Don't break them. Change them. Don't break them. Consequentialism. It's a fancy word that means the ends justify the means. Consequentialism is often used to justify doing bad things. It's okay because, you know what, I put the money back later. Or it's okay because I really needed to get into that postdoctoral degree program. But what are the secondary effects? If the consequence of one bad choice is a good outcome, if the consequences of breaking the rules now is a good outcome, what happens is the secondary effects. What lessons do the kids learn who watch this? What are the tertiary effects? If we think long-term, we're no longer considered, it's easier to think long-term when you don't have a horse in the race. But it's important to think long-term if you want to be happy with yourself in the long run. So thinking long-term is a way to defeat short-term consequentialism. And last is public versus private. This is the story of the kid who comes home with a report card and the parent has to sign it because the kid stole a pencil from a classmate in school. And the dad says, "Why are you stealing pencils from your classmates?" And he goes, "But I needed one to take the test." And the dad says, "That's still not right. You should never steal. Now I got to go down to the office and get a box of pencils for myself." Steal from the office because, well, that's work. That's a different world. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there, so it's okay to be a dog. That doesn't make sense. So one of the ways to address this is to argue that, you know what, if your behavior, public or private, were to appear on the front page of the newspaper, how would you feel about it? Can you justify what you did if everybody knew about it? And way to treat that, to inoculate ourselves against it in the long haul, is what I call, what would Jesus do? That little armband? And if you're non-religious, ask yourself, what would Forrest Gump do in a similar circumstance? What would your next door neighbor do? If we can use good role models to remind us that all behavior, public or private, is a measure of our character, it'll open up our thinking to make some better choices. So, let's review. If you want, take your camera out, take a picture of that. It's one of the ways I do it, so I don't have to write things down so much. Myopia, moral egoism, ethical relativity, consequentialism, and public and private behavior. These are all justifications people use to make bad choices. And if you don't want to be one of those people, use the column on the right to change the way we live. 5 more seconds. Good to go? Okay. The team teaching model talks about teach, enforce, advocate, and model. Those of us who believe in character and ethics should go out of our way to explain it to the children. They don't know the difference. If they see bad behavior, they're going to model it. But if we can teach them and then enforce that behavior, punish them for choosing not to do it and reward them for choosing correctly, and then we advocate it to our friends and our neighbors, and then we personally role model the behavior. That's the team teach method that produces the best results. Okay, pop quiz. We talked earlier about sportsmanship versus gamesmanship. Let's take a few tests. You make the call. Sportsmanship or gamesmanship? Here we go. In volleyball, you're a setter, you're in the back row, and somebody from the other team makes a beautiful spike and the ball comes at you. And as you're moving out of the way, it tips your finger and goes out of bounds. The official gives your team the point because he did not see it tip your finger. Had you not been there, it still would have gone out of bounds. The tipping of the finger didn't really change the outcome, but what should you do? If you hold your hand up and say, yeah, it tipped me, you're giving the other side the serve or the point. If you choose to keep quiet, is that gamesmanship or sportsmanship? Who here says it's gamesmanship? It's correct. Understandable, but correct. How many here play baseball? There's a move in baseball called framing the pitch. Anybody hear that? Framing the pitch is where the catcher is waiting for the pitch, and if it lands outside the strike zone, he quickly brings his mitt, brings his glove back into the strike zone so that the official will think it was a strike. They teach this. Is this gamesmanship? By show of hands. That's correct. My teammate threw a ball, but I'm trying to change the official's point of view. In tennis, here's a tough one. This is a tough one. The opponent has a beautiful serve that you think was in bounds, and when you reach for it, it spins away from your racket so you don't get to touch the ball. But the line judge says, out! You saw it in. The line judge gave you the point. What do? There's some who would argue it would be nice to intentionally screw up the next point, to reverse the scale. But in my mind, that doesn't respect the official. And who knows? You might be wrong. In my mind, you do not counter the official's decision. You take it and you shut up. Did it cost you a point? No. You were given a point, but that wasn't your fault. Deflategate. Was it wrong for Tom Brady to change the poundage inside the football? Doesn't matter a lot. Probably didn't matter at all. He's good enough to win without this. Is that gamesmanship or sportsmanship? There are stories of football groundskeepers who intentionally overwater the field the week before they play a team that has a really good running back. How many think that's gamesmanship? In soccer, the Women's World Cup, where Brandi Chastain ripped off her jersey on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Remember that one? That was a shootout match. The score was, I think, 0-0. And then the final matchup, they had a kickoff. And the Chinese got 5 shots on cage, and the Americans got 5 shots on cage. And Brianna Scurry was the goaltender for the U.S. team. And the rule in soccer is you have to stand behind the goal line until the opponent's foot touches the ball. Well, she was anticipating the kick, and in the first time she had one foot out, and the official said nothing. The ball still went to the back of the net. On the second time, she really jumped for it. Still, they didn't say anything. On the fifth attempt, she was out with both feet, and her anticipation closed the angle. She was able to deflect the ball, and the Chinese lost the World Cup 4-5. In America, we put Brandi Chastain on the cover of Sports Illustrated. In China, the headline said, "Americans cheat," and they had a picture of Brianna Scurry outside the goal box, and the ball was not yet touched by the opponent. In swimming. The Olympics in Atlanta featured an American swimmer who had asthma and was allowed to take one of those breath puffers, right? One of those inhalers. And because she had a message from her doctor saying she genuinely suffers from pneumonia or from asthma, but she didn't need to 6 of those immediately before the race. But that's not what bothered me. What bothered me was before the start of the race, she put a handful of water from the pool into her mouth, and on the starting block, she swished it around, and then she aimed it into the lane next to her, in front of her toughest opponent. She went on to win the race. I wonder what that squirting of the water into the adjacent lane might have done to her opponent's psyche. Well, the coaches love the idea of psyching out the competition. There's nothing against the rules. But is it sportsmanship or is it gamesmanship? My working definition is character is revealed when the price of doing the right thing is more than you're willing to pay. Character is revealed in sport. It's not created in sport, but it is revealed in sport. The price is more than you're willing to pay. It's easy to give money back to the cashier when they put more change in your pocket by maybe 20 cents. But if somebody accidentally slips a $100 bill in with the ones, and you see what you were given, it's a tougher decision. But character is revealed when doing the right thing is more than you're willing to pay. That's Michael Josephson. I like to think of it as courage. Courage is not the absence of fear, the absence of temptation, the absence of pressure. Courage is behaving correctly in the presence of pressure and temptation. Courage is revealed when the price of doing the right thing is more than we're willing to pay. Our boys and girls are fighting in a war overseas in the Middle East. I don't know what it'd feel like to wake up in the morning and know that somebody might shoot at you or an IED device might go off. I don't know what it's like to have to draw that kind of courage and get out of bed. But I do know that on a daily basis, we're all faced with questions of character and ethics. And now it's a chance for us to at least demonstrate the courage we do have. Anybody recognize the guy on the left? Wizard of Westwood, Coach John Wooden. I asked him to define success once in an interview I had with him. He says, success is the peace of mind, which is a direct result of the self-satisfaction in knowing you did your best to become the best you're capable of becoming. It's all about achieving our own personal potential, not about achieving victory at all costs. Let me close with the American poet laureate Robert Frost's most famous poem. Whoops, I closed it out there. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood. And sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, was just as fair, yet having perhaps the better claim, for it was grassy and it wanted wear. Though, as for the passing there, had worn them both really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. I saved the first for another day. Yet, knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I would ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. That made all the difference. Thanks for coming. We actually have a microphone, and if anybody would like to ask me a question in front of the audience, now would be the perfect time. Raise your hand and we'll run over with the microphone. I know that speaking into a microphone is a phobia just slightly more difficult than snakes and spiders.
We do have just a couple minutes before 7:30, so if you can hang tight and hear at least one question.
The one that I'm most known for was the 1973 World Swimming Team Trials, where the U.S. National Championships would select the fastest 3 athletes in every event would automatically be put on the World Championship team. It's the second most important meet behind the Olympic trials on American soil. And in that race, I was the fastest 100-meter backstroker, and yet the turn official wasn't certain my hand touched the wall. And so she went to the meet referee and said, I think he ought to be disqualified. And he said, you know, I watched him and I thought he did touch the wall. So my coach came running over to me and said, John, they're going to let you break the tie. Did you touch the wall? And I knew that if I was placed on the team in that event, I would automatically be the backstroker on the medley relay, a guaranteed gold medal that year. I might win a gold in the 100-meter backstroke as well. On the basis of my answer, I would get a possible 2 world championship medals. But I also knew that I don't think I touched the wall. And so I said to the coach, I didn't touch the wall. He ran back to the officials gesticulated and they disqualified me, and I didn't go to the world championships in the 100-meter backstroke. And it hurt. I remember walking to the rental car in the parking lot as the PA announcer was saying in first place and second place and third place, and after the 7th place finisher, he said, and then John Naber was disqualified. It stung. It's like he cheated. It embarrassed me. But I look back now on that decision with pride for a couple of reasons. Number 1, it was the right thing to do, pure and simple. Number 2, I was awarded the Baron Pierre de Coubertin Fair Play Trophy the following year because of making that decision. Same thing that Christine Quantz should have won in 1996. And of all the choices that I made in my swimming career, though that one was the most expensive, it was also the one of which I'm most proud. So yeah, I've suffered from it. I've also erred on the wrong side. I made some bad choices. In backstroke, we use the lane lines with the flags, like a used car lot that hang 5 meters off the wall, to tell the swimmers that the wall is exactly 5 meters away. And when I was in high school, I went up to one of my opponents and I said, does the wind look like it's blowing those flags out of position to you? I'm embarrassed. I made bad choices as well. But just because you made one bad choice doesn't mean you have to continue making bad choices. And I'm proud to say that hopefully going forward we will all be making better choices tonight as a result of what we heard. That's a fair question. Thank you for asking. Last chance, going once. Yes, over here on the right side.
You were 20 years old when you were in the 76 Olympics.
That is correct.
So the story you just told, you were what, 17?
Yes.
What was your background as far as how upbringing you will to make that choice?
Well, it's kind of, that's a fair question. My father was an elder in our church and by his own admission was an atheist. So one could argue he believed in doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. I was a Christian for the right reasons, but not that year. So I guess my parents drilled into me the importance of truth and right and goodness. I don't think I would be judged positively for my character. I just knew that I couldn't get away with lying about it again with the kids in the locker room afterwards. You know, I knew that somebody was going to come up and say, come on, John, tell the truth. And my mom said I have a face that would crack if it lied. Not that I don't lie, but my face cracks when I lie. So you shouldn't do it. So maybe that was a little bit of where I was raised. I am happy to say that winning the Baron Pierre de Coubertin Award made me more keenly aware of the importance of sportsmanship and fair play that led me to become a member of Michael Josephson's supporters out in California and helped me create the Pursuing Victory with Honor talk. Thank you, that's a fair question. Okay, one more? No? Yes? Yes, here we go. Okay, last one.
So if you think of all the sports on a spectrum from sportsmanship to more gamesmanship, is there more, like who is the worst, I guess?
I would guess, I don't know for sure, I'm not one to judge in that sense, but I would guess the more money that's at stake for victory, the more likely we'll see cheaters in that sport. But then again, we saw the Chinese play badminton very poorly, so I don't know. There have been cheaters in Olympics and fencing. There have been cheaters in, or badminton I would use that example. There's cheaters in every sport now, I guess, because victory matters so much. And I suppose if you're a kid in deep south of China or an East German and your coach tells you, you must eat these vitamins or you go home without being part of our team, the pressure is high. But once again, that's not really pressure, that's temptation. And so I wouldn't judge, I wouldn't care to judge. But there are good people in every sport and they should be championed. We should advocate and model that behavior. Listen, I talk all night, I won't. Thank you so much for coming, I appreciate you.